Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Mr. Raghav Khandelwal, Ms. Sita Thakur, Ms. Aditi Pandey, and curious for law organizing this webinar. I'm very thankful to my colleagues, my office colleagues, my friends, giving me opportunity to interact with you all. The topic of the day is fundamentals of criminal trial. There are three things. If you go in the chronology of the topic, you will see the sequence of the words fundamental of criminal trial. So before conducting the trial, which is related to criminal in nature, there must be the fundamental. So moment there is a fundamental, meaning thereby there must be clarity in your mind. There must be clarity in respect of the basic concept. Basically, the criminal proceedings have been divided in so many parts, like investigation, collection of the evidence, filing of the charge sheet, taking cognizance, then proceeding further. There are so many procedures which has been defined in the Code of Criminal Procedure. But for the purpose of the trial, the real stage would start from filing the charge sheet before the competent court of law. One thing I would like to mention here, there is no concept of the charge sheet in the CRPC. This is known in the common parlance. The word which has been used in the CRPC is the police report, which has been defined under section 2, a small r. That's the definition of the police report in CRPC. The charge sheet, basically what happens, the police collect the evidence under section 2H of the Indian Evidence Act, prepare the draft charge sheet, annex all the documents and the list of witnesses, and it sends to the prosecuting agency, the office of the public prosecutor, to go through the charge sheet and weight the charge sheet. So after the conclusion of the investigation, the matter comes to the domain of the prosecuting agency. That is the office of the Directorate of the Prosecution, and that was assigned to the additional public prosecutor, assistant public prosecutor as per the requirement. So the public prosecutor will examine the matter. If public prosecution has any confusion in mind, ambiguity in the case of the investigating agency, he can put the query and it can be solved. So after being satisfied with the charge sheet, the public prosecutor placed the charge sheet before the competent court of law, that is under section 173 CRPC. Along with the charge sheet, basically the charge sheet is nothing but opinion of the investigating officer, which is not binding upon the court of law. The moment the charge sheet will be filed before the competent court of law, the court has option to accept the charge sheet, reject the charge sheet, or give the direction to the investigating agency to conduct the further investigation. That is under section 173 subclause 8 CRPC. If the court is satisfied, then court can take the cognizance. Here I would like to mention you, in criminal law, though at every stage court has to apply its judicial mind, but in essence, as per the requirement of law, the court is supposed to apply its judicial mind in the real sense at three stages. The first stage at the time of taking the cognizance. The second stage at the time of inquiry, that is consideration of the charge. And the third stage would be the final argument, that is appreciation of all the evidence which have been come through the examination of the witnesses before the competent court of law. However, though the court is applying its mind, but the scale of applying its mind is different at all the three stages. At the stage of taking the cognizance, the court has to see the material for the limited purpose, whether the offense has been committed or not. That is for the very limited purpose. Court will see, glance the document, a statement to the witnesses, opinion of the charge sheet, then it will come to the conclusion, yes, offense has been committed. So the first requirement is the satisfaction of the court, yes, offense has been committed. The moment the court will satisfy itself, yes, offense has been committed, then the court will decide who are the culprits, who have committed the offense. Then the court will find out, though the police has given the name of the accused, but court has ample power, jurisdiction, to go beyond the list of the accused supplied by the investigating agency in the charge sheet. You have a judgment, Swill India versus State, where the court, even the person is not named in the charge sheet as an accused, the court has the jurisdiction to summon that person also if there is material to connect that person, that stranger. The moment the court will identify the accused, the court will issue the summons to the accused persons for their appearance. Now the cognizance. You all are aware the cognizance is taken only under section 190 CRPC by the court of the magistrate. I'm not talking about the court of the session, that's altogether different provision. So there are three subsections under section 190 CRPC. Under section 191A, the cognizance should be taken on complaint. 1B, the cognizance would be taken on police report, that is charge sheet. 1C, the courts of its own information or the knowledge. But the issuance of the process is same under section 204 CRPC. The court will issue the summons to the accused persons, or bailable warrant or non-bailable warrant. The court has the discretion to choose the nature of the process, that is the summon, warrants, warrant of two types, bailable or non-bailable warrants. As per the nature of the commission of the offense, the court chose the issuance of the process out of three options of the process. If the accused is on bail or anticipatory bail or arrested and granted bail, accused will appear if the person concerned is not arrested during the course of the investigation. On the appearance of the accused will move the application for bail before the magisterial court under section 437 and the accused will release on bail if accused is satisfied to court this is the fit case for release on bail. However, unlike other states, in Delhi, we have one judgment, court on its motion versus CBI, which was subsequently upheld by the divisional bench of High Court. First court of motion versus CBI is the single judgment of Justice J.D. Kapoor. The second one is of Justice B.P. Sanghi and P.S. Teji, and I had the occasion to become the part of the judgment, being amicus curiae on behalf appointed by the court. So, as per court on its motion, if the accused has not been arrested during the course of the investigation and the charge sheet has been filed without arrest, it is mandatory on the part of the magisterial court to release the accused on bail, immaterial whether the offence are cognizable, uncognizable, bailable, non-bailable. Upon the appearance of the accused, it is the duty of the concerned magistrate to ensure that the accused is having in possession of entire material filed by the prosecuting agency along with the charge sheet. If there is any deficiency, the accused has the right to move the application for the fulfillment of the deficient documents. That is under section 207 CRPC. So unless and until the entire document is supplied to the accused, the matter cannot be proceeded further. If the matter is exclusively triable by the court of the session, the moment there would be completion of the supply of the document, matter would be committed to the court of session for the further proceeding. If the ministerial trial, the matter would be posted for the examination, for the inquiry, that is for the consideration of the charge. Here, it is very important to note that you cannot wait the stage when the trial is actually start. If you are really interested in conducting the trial with honesty and true sense, you have to start the preparation of the trial at the time of the supply of the charge sheet. You have to see the entire material. You have to read the charge sheet very meticulously, the statement of the witnesses, the documents filed by the prosecuting agency. You correlate everything. You make a note and have the clear concept in your case, of the case in your mind. There must be clarity in your mind. What is the case of the prosecution? How the case has started, where it has been terminated. How they have started, if they have started, at which point, what evidence they have considered to move further. So you have to examine each and every chain of the case which is being set up by the prosecuting agency. Suppose there are electronic evidence and you are not in possession of the evidence, without any further delay, you immediately move the application for supply of the document. You have the opportunity to move the application under section 207, or you can invoke section 91 CRPC for summoning of the document. Suppose there are telephonic conversation, there are CCTV, and they have, our prosecuting agency has not filed the call detail report, and the call detail report is going to support you. Immediately you move the application before the competent court of law to preservation or supply or summoning of the call detail report. Preservation of the CCTV camera. If you are taking the plea of alibi, you immediately preserve the entire material at the very first instance, otherwise it can be destroyed. There is apprehension of being destruction of the evidence. One thing is very important, as per my experience, I cannot claim that I am a very experienced person. I am also a student of law like you people. Every day we are learning from the judgment and arguing and doing the matter before the court of law. And every day we realize, yes, we have committed this wrong. I should have not asked this question. I should have not argued. I have to argue in this particular way. I should have asked this question. So every proceeding teaches you where you are lacking, how you will improve yourself. My advice would be for the person who is very keen to conducting the trial, must visit the place of incident. There must be clarity in your mind regarding the topology of the place of incident. Suppose there is an accident case, must visit the place of incident. Otherwise, you won't be able to find out which direction the car, if you are not visiting the place of incident, your case would be limited only to the site plan filed by the prosecuting agency. So you do visit the place of incident, accident, find out the real position. If required, you prepare yourself the rough site plan so that you can cross-examine the eyewitness or the person to the incident subsequently, and you can bring the contradiction amongst the witnesses. Suppose there is a murder case, must visit robbery, kidnapping, go find out if the trap cases in the Prevention of Corruption Act, must visit the place of incident, compare the site plan which has been supplied to you by the investigating agency, find out whether this site plan and the facts narrated by them in the site charge sheet is fitting in the two sense or not. So do the analysis of the entire material. Make a particular topic, divide the entire case in the different topics. How it's a start, what is the next stage? Then distinguish the witnesses, which witness is pertaining to which incident. correlate their statement with the documents. But if you are practicing in Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, my only advice would be thorough with volume 3 of the Punjab Police Rule. Punjab Police Rule gives you the process how the investigation would be conducted, how the case diary would be maintained, how the daily diary would be maintained. So if you are master in Punjab Police Rule, if you are master of Delhi High Court Rule, because if you go to Delhi High Court Rule, you will find a chapter in criminal side practice. So you must read Delhi High Court Rule or Punjab High Court Rule or any other High Court wherever you are practicing, and their police rule, because every state has the police rule, that is the mandatory direction to the investigating agency to conduct the investigation in particular way.
Hello. ये सब प्राइमरी में आएगा, लेकिन फिर इसमें डेटा है.
So if you are master of the procedure, then you won't face any kind of the problem in the trial. So get your fundamental clear from Police Act, Punjab Police Rule and Delhi High Court rules. Apart from this, you read the judgment also, because you have to break the case on 2 counts. First would be on the factual counts. Second would be on the law point. Because you also have to break the ingredients of the particular offense. An ingredient of the particular offense would be broken if you are clear in the law also. Because your question would be in that particular form. Because suppose you have read one judgment, and in that judgment there are so many things. So you try to develop your cross-examination to bring those facts so that that particular judgment will help you at the time of the final argument. So you have to break the ingredients, you have to break the witnesses on the facts. This is one more important aspect, that is section 231 of CRPC. I would advise you to read 231. If you find there are more than one witness to some facts as per the case of the prosecuting agency, so don't cross-examine one witness. Otherwise, the moment you will cross-examine that witness, you will disclose your entire defense. Keep your defense with yourself, with your heart. Move the application to the court for the deferment of the cross-examination of the witness. You move the application, let the examination in chief of both the witnesses be recorded, and the cross-examination would be conducted simultaneously. Because the moment you open your defense, there is a likelihood the prosecuting agency would like to improve their case, damage you by way of the examination in chief of the second witness. So get the evidence examination in chief of all the witnesses to the same fact be recorded, then you start cross-examining the witnesses. Always keep in the mind. And there is law. You have to only satisfy the court what prejudice is going to be caused to you. Now, my advice would be, and I've already mentioned, at the time of supply of the charge sheet, you start preparing your entire case. If you are satisfied yourself that this is the fit case for discharge, then only argue on the point of charge. Otherwise, there is no point getting the adverse finding by the court by arguing the case. Don't argue the case on the point of the charge for the sake of the argument. To satisfy your client, first you yourself get satisfied whether this is a fit case for argument on charge or not. If you are satisfied you are not going to discharge and the matter is fit for the trial, mention to the court, okay, frame the charge, let us go ahead. Then the trial. Trial means what? Trial means you are trying to test the reliability, credibility, trustworthiness of witnesses. The process is, first the prosecuting agency would examine the witness, that is called examination in chief. Then you would be given the opportunity to cross-examine the witness. Cross-examination of the witness means rebuttal of the allegations made in 161, made in examination in chief. What the people always commit the wrong, you have been given the statement under 161 CRPC, but you will find in the court some of the portions of the 161 CRPC has not been disclosed as stated by the witness in its examination in chief. But what the lawyers do, the portion which has not been said by the stated by the witness, they cross-examine the witness on that very facts. So don't do that mistake. If witness has given you something as a bonus, enjoy the bonus. Don't cross-examine the witness on the basis of 161 CRPC statement. My advice would be always cross-examine the witness on the basis of the examination in chief. And there must be clarity in your mind what you are going to achieve with the witness. If you are not going to achieve anything from the witness, witness has not made any incriminating evidence against you, don't cross-examine the witness. But sometimes, though the witness is formal witness, you can develop your cross-examination from the formal witness. So your duty is to increase the number of the contradiction in the case of the prosecution. You can succeed in contradicting the witness only when you are master of the facts. Suppose there is a formal witness from the police station who has registered the FIR. So he is coming to depose only regarding the registration of the FIR. And he is the duty officer of the police station. But you must know the duty officer of the police station has very bigger role. The entire CRPC, the entire procedure, the entire Punjab police rule is roving around two persons. One is the station house officer, that is SHO, and another is duty officer. Why duty officer? Because first let me clear SHO. The act gives the power to SHO. He can delegate the power to other subordinate officer. The duty officer is there to write each and every event, each and every acts of the police station. Suppose a raiding team is leaving the police station. There is a departure of the raiding team from the police station. It is mandatory on the part of the duty officer to write the departure entry, get the signature of the person who is leading the raiding team. If there is search and seizure, it is incumbent upon the duty officer to make the entry in the DD register. Thereafter, the seized article would be deposited to the Malkhana Muharrar. If the person is being interrogated, he is in lockup, it is the duty of the duty officer to mention in the register what time he was taken from the lockup, went to the interrogation room for the purpose of interrogation. Suppose there is a disclosure statement of accused. You don't have any document. So from the duty officer, suppose disclosure is made on 29th June 2020. So date is mentioned in your disclosure statement, but time is not mentioned. So you can ask from the duty officer, have you made an entry what time accused was taken from the lockup for his interrogation? Generally he will go no, he will say no, because generally they don't follow the law. Generally what they do, they obtain the signature on the blank papers, and as per their suitability, they write so many things to support their case. Suppose there is a search and seizure, you can ask the duty officer, have you made the entry in the Delhi Diary Register? If he has made, well and good. He has not made, then you can raise the doubt regarding the search and seizure. So you can ask all these questions from the duty officer. You can ask these questions only if you are familiar with the provisions, the procedure. So conducting the trial, your fundamentals must be clear in all respect. You must be knowing the procedure, that is the CRPC, High Court rules, and police rules. So if you are master in all these things, then you can easily conduct the trial. You collect entire evidence. You can take the benefit even from the remand application, which is not the part of the charge sheet. Why remand application is important? Because if police arrest, they will seek the remand of the accused person, and in remand application, they will mention the facts of the allegation and the facts of the case. Suppose they have taken one stand in the remand application and the charge sheet is complete deviation from the remand application, you can confront the investigating officer. Is it correct that that was your case, which is not in the charge sheet? So you have entirely manipulated the entire case. So carefully read the remand applications, all the miscellaneous applications. If you have moved application, the reply to that application by the prosecuting agency, the order passed by the court time to time, that will help you. So don't ignore a single piece of material. Every material from the very inception of the case is crucial for conducting the trial. In trial, you have to be very calm. There is no concept of aggression in the trial, because you are going to cross-examine the witness with whom you are not familiar with. So you have to develop a rapport so that you can obtain the answer. You can get the answer as per your desire. You ask those questions where there is a clarity in your mind. Don't ask any question to the witness on the presumption and conjecture. Formulate the questions in a way with all confidence the witness would not have any choice except giving the answer as per your choice. You deliberate yourself, if I'm asking this question, the witness could give this X answer, Y answer, Z answer. If he gives X answer, whether it is profitable, useful to me or not, Y answer, it is useful to me, Z answer, it is useful to me or not. If you are satisfied in all three scenarios, the answer is useful, then you ask the question. And if you are asking the question, try to think at least 10 stages ahead. If I am asking this question, why I am asking question? Because after 10 questions, I will kill the witness at this particular certain point. So lay down the foundation at the very inception with the introductory questions. Ask the introductory questions so that you will be aware of the temperament of the accused. If witness is very shrewd, become shrewd. Witness is polite, become polite. Witness is aggressive, become aggressive. If you are going to examine the expert witness, you must do your homework, because it's very difficult to cross-examine the expert witnesses. They are master in their field, but you are a stranger. You don't have any idea. Suppose you are going to examine the doctor who had conducted the post-mortem. You must be aware of the medical jurisprudence. If you are not aware, kindly consult a doctor who has the knowledge. Get the knowledge, then you go and cross-examine the witness. Otherwise, don't ask the question which can damage you. If you are going to cross-examine the handwriting expert, read the literature of the handwriting, how conduct the cross-examination handwriting expert. Like, you examine the document yourself, compare the disputed signature, disputed handwriting with the actual handwriting or the sample handwriting. What is the nature of the slant? Where is the pen lifting? Where is the pressure? What is the curvature? So you must know, compare yourself, what is the habit, whether the slant is going left side or right side originally, whether the witness who is signing, there is a pen lifting or in one go, whether there is a break in the writing or not, what kind of the pressure he is putting. So you do your homework before cross-examining the indicting witness. If you are going to cross-examine the approver, you must do some homework regarding the approval. You collect his antecedent, try to demolish his conduct, reliability. If he is not reliable, then his entire evidence would go. Examine his bail application or the miscellaneous application, what kind of the stand he has taken before the court. If his statement is, if his bail application or any miscellaneous application is exculpatory in nature, try to demolish the approver by showing his earlier application कि Mr. Approver, you have taken this stand in your bail application, you are not aware of the facts, you are not connected with the case. Now you are saying you are aware of everything. So you have deliberately made the false statement before the court of law by saying that you don't know anything about the case. You have falsely been implicated, you are innocent person. So do all the homeworks. Without doing homework, you cannot succeed in conducting the trial. So make your fundamental clear before conducting the trial. Read the file carefully. Don't miss a single sentence, single line in the charge sheet or the evidence. Be analytical from the top to bottom. Examine the document very carefully and you will find so many things. Every day, I have conducted a lot of CBI matters, the matter being investigated by Enforcement Directorate. The matters are very voluminous. Despite having the volume, every day we are finding lack of materials which contradicts the case of the prosecuting agency. And you can achieve only if you are very meticulous in reading. Make a parallel note, topic by topic. What would be topic? One thing also, if you are conducting the cross-examination, start the cross-examination of a particular topic, develop your defense, immediately give the suggestion. Don't wait to give the suggestion at the end, because at the end you will miss so many points from your mind. If witness is volunteering, giving the volunteer statement during your cross-examination, immediately cross-examine the witness of that very, otherwise you forget. And you won't get chance further to cross-examine the witness. If the witness is provoking you, if the opposite counsel is provoking you, don't get yourself provocated. Because they will try you to provoke, to deviate from your thoughts. So be patient, be calm, cool, clarity in your mind. Don't be in hurry, take your own time. If you are not able to come to the defense, consult your senior, consult your colleagues, read the commentary. No case is difficult. If you read the charge sheet, you will find every case is foolproof case. It is you who have to demolish the case of the prosecution. You can demolish only if you are master of the facts, your fundamentals are clear. So this is my suggestion, my dear friends, regarding the trial. Now I think we are entering into the question answer session. Mr. Raghav.
Yes, sir. It was really great to hear you and the nuances of the criminal trial you've shared. I don't think we could ever get to know about it in academic books and curriculum. Let's switch to the Q&A session. One of the questions which has been raised is what electronic evidence falls within the purview of primary or secondary evidences?
See, if you read section 63, 62, 63, 64, 65, you are talking about electronic evidence, I believe?
Yeah.
Because your voice was not clear.
Yeah. Shall I repeat for you?
No. There is one judgment, Dharambir Khattar versus CBI Delhi High Court, passed by Justice Muralidhar. If you see the definition of the document in Indian Evidence Act and in Information Technology Act, the electronic materials are the document as defined in the law. So there is a original and there is a copy. Suppose there is a hard disk of a computer. The hard disk could be the original material. You can prepare the mirror image of the hard disk, but you can copy. So the moment there is a copy of the document, that would be the secondary evidence. If you are relying on the secondary evidence, it is mandatory under the law 65A, 65B to give the certificate by the person certifying that how this document was, where the document is in existence, whether there is any tampering or not, whether this document is in exclusive possession of that person or not, whether the original can be produced whenever is required by the court. So if this is the secondary evidence, then 65B is required. Even there is a judgment of Supreme Court, P.B. Anwar Bashir, of Justice Rowington, Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaur, or if it is not secondary, then the original evidence is there. I think I am clear. If there is any ambiguity,
no, sorry.
Ask.
Sir, my next question to you is it's by Mr. Rajat. What do you think media can? How do you think media can positively influence a trial? And do you think there is a future of having important trials being telecasted live?
See, this is long debate on this media trial. As per my experience, the media influences the trial, the mind of the judges, because judges are also human beings and they get influence with the public perceptions. So the media has the role, and these days the media persons, the persons who is holding the debate in media as an anchor is not having the basic concept of the law, but he's sitting there. They are sitting there to give the judgment on the point of the law. They decide the case before the case commences before the court of law. So, of course, being a defense counsel, with all sense of responsibility, I would say the media is influencing the trial, but it's vary from the judges to judges. There are some kind of the judges, they don't care what is coming in the media. They only follow the rule of law and the code of civil procedure and the process of the law. So it is, you cannot say with all certainty, yes, the media is influencing, but yes, the media has the influence on the criminal trial.
That's all right, sir. Another question is how misuse of bail, delay in filing complaints, and delay in investigation during COVID-19 is going to impact criminal trial system. This is by Ms. Ayushi Mishra.
It is not. Can you come again, because your voice is not coming clear?
Sir, is it clear now? Yeah. So how misuse of bail, delay in filing complaints, and delay in investigation during COVID-19 is going to impact the criminal trial system?
I don't know about other places, but in Delhi, the urgent matter is being filed. The judges are hearing the bail application. Judges are disposing the bail application. Judges are very sensitive. They are cognizant. They are sensitive to us, the COVID-19, and keeping all the views. They are granting the bail. The people are getting the bail. You have to satisfy the court whether you have a good case for the bail or not. And the prosecuting agency is also doing its job. They are investigating the matter. They are filing the charge sheet. So the system is working, but it is not working as it used to prior to the COVID. Of course, the COVID has the effect, but in Delhi, from the court of the magistrate till the high court, the judges are spending time. They are giving the sufficient hearing. They are disposing the bail application. So I don't think the bail is being affected due to COVID-19 in Delhi. Moreover, even the people, they have been convicted or they are under trial prisoners. There is a guidelines by the High Power Committee led by Justice Hima Kohli. There is a guidelines. They have given the category of the under trial prisoners or the person who have been convicted to be released on the interim bail. Earlier it was for 45 days. Now it has been extended for another 45 days. So the people are being released. More than 6,000 persons have been released on the interim bail. So the bail is, I don't think the bail is getting affected. You have the remedy, you can avail your remedy, and the court is open 24 hours, 7 days to decide your bail. One thing I would like to say, even when the COVID was not there, we are very fortunate in being practitioner in Delhi. The Delhi court is open even in the midnight on Sunday or any holiday to protect the personal liberty of individual. So I don't think there is any effect of the bail due to the COVID in Delhi.
Sir, what is the scope of criminology as a field to work in, and what do you think is the role of criminal psychology in criminal trial?
Sir, this is a debatable question. Of course, the criminal psychology has the role to play. And in a rape case, which was going on in Delhi High Court, the committee was constituted to read the psychology of the rape accused, why they entered into this kind of the offenses. And the report was filed. The survey was conducted. The committee was formed. The criminal psycho is also an effective factor for commission of the crime.
Okay. So that's all right. I think we're almost done with the questions, and it's already 5. Due to paucity of time, we have to wrap it up now. I would like to thank you for giving such a great insight and experience-based knowledge to all of us. Thank you for sparing time out of your busy schedule. I would also like to thank Shashank Diwan for making this session work out with us. That's all. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us your precious time. At the end, I would request all the participants to kindly refer to the chat box. We'll share the link for e-certificate, and you can fill the Google form, and e-certificate shall be granted you henceforth.
Thank you so much, and
Thank
all
you, sir.
the and all the participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.